I saw a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the view of Wolfpack Research or any of its officers. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. We are not investment advisors. We hold no registrations with the SEC, FINRA, or any other regulatory agency, and none of the opinions expressed on this podcast should be considered investment advice. The listener should assume that we have positions in and stand to benefit from any stock or other security mentioned on this podcast. Do your own research before making investment decisions.
Welcome to the Wolf Den, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us again. I'm here with the pack. Today we have with our guest, Darren, who's joining the pack today, and Carl, our sound engineer. God help us all. We have a special guest today. It's Roderick Tiberius Boyd. Correct? Is your middle name Tiberius?
Hey, Dan. Thanks a lot. Really good to be here. And you know, just as importantly as talking to you, of course, is Carl. You know, just to be around Carl.
That's right.
Right.
I don't use it in a formal sense, but I will start using it now that I'm making this up. Yes.
You should. You should. Very good. Good for you, Roderick. Roddy, welcome to our show. Is it true that your parents named you after
Piper?
No, Rod Stewart.
Oh,
I wish. I have asked them that sober and drunk. Both of us. And I am Roderick Stewart Boyd. And
he is. He's Roderick Stewart Boyd. It's really not Tiberius. It's Stewart.
I was born in 68. So Rod Stewart, you know,
He was around. He was
singing for the Jeff Beck group at that time. I don't think Mom was. I asked her if she had anything she wanted to get off the chest,
right.
You know, and Dad didn't dig that.
Yeah.
I would just say it's Roddy Piper. I would just go to Piper.
Yeah, well, because my parents.
Well, I think you're really kind of missing the point, Carl. It's not Roderick Piper Boyd. It's Roderick Stewart Boyd.
Yeah, but you ignored the Stewart. Just do
you
Roddy.
said one smart thing today. Just give it up. Roddy is, many people who listen to my show, the foremost investigative journalist, in my opinion, today in the United States. It is an extreme compliment at one time and also a very low bar because he's one of like 3 or 4 left in the United States today. So, but he does a great job. I'm not sure about the other 2. Roddy graduated from Fordham University in 1990 with an English major in language and literature and letters. So he's a dummy. And there's that. Where we pick up with Roddy, and I'm going to have Roddy fill in the blanks, is when he started with the New York Post in 2005 to 2007. So Roddy and I have known each other, I guess we're going on about 10 years now, right, Roddy? And we'll get into that story a little bit later because I think it's funny. Maybe you won't. Before that, Roddy, you were born and then you were raised. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah, I mean, I've read some of that stuff. You and I have talked about it in the past, but you kind of come from a financial background that would have maybe made more sense that you become a banker rather than the banker's worst enemy.
Yeah, let me just say for the record, I was indeed born. That there is empirical, sort of objectively verifiable evidence of that. Yeah.
Check that off the list.
No, I absolutely was born into a heavily Wall Street family. My father, Mike Boyd, ran a hedge fund for many, many years and certainly was steeped in this stuff, you know, working summer jobs, stuff like that.
Working summer jobs? And listen, look, my father sold insurance and I didn't have to work a summer job. What was your dad like? Your dad was a hedge fund titan and he's making you work a summer job?
Yeah, this is a true story. I had, at the age of 12, I had learned that kids were getting allowances. And it turned out to be not just a thing I saw in the Brady Bunch, but actual kids were getting allowances in the New York City suburbs. And some of them were getting fairly substantial allowances. And beyond that, there was an entire sort of cohort of kids who just, they didn't have an allowance. They just had access to pools of funds.
Yeah.
And that seemed like just a absolutely excellent idea for me. at the time. And so I broached this with my father, thinking, you start low and you work your way up. And he did not share my enthusiasm, but what he did do was he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll meet you halfway. I'll get you a way to bring in some real money for yourself, not just a couple of bucks a week, which is what I was asking for in 1979, 1980. A few days later, it's Saturday morning and I'm kicking around the house watching cartoons or whatever. And he says, hey, come out to the garage. I got you something. And it's heavy. Give me a hand getting out of the car. So I was like, well, this is pretty ripping. And it was a brand new lawn boy.
Oh, wow.
So he said, congrats, son. You are officially into the lawn mowing business.
47 more payments and it's all yours.
Well, I tease him about that, but he actually funded all of my capital expenses.
Oh.
It was just a classic lawn boy hand push mower. But what's interesting is we lived in an area that had pretty nice zoning. It's like 2.5 acre minimum. So it was.
And he got you a push mower. There are so many messages in what he did.
Yeah. So I was pushing this mower like I was working like an orc. I was working like a friggin' slave. Wow. I mean, for $4, I would push it over 3 landscaped acres. Nothing is given, everything is earned. And I sort of took that with me.
$4. Was this in the 50s or 60s? I mean, like, when were you pushing this lawnmower?
It was like $5 or something to mow a lawn.
Really?
Yeah. Again, this was 1979, 1980.
Yeah.
So it was $5 is, again, real money. It sucked.
Yeah, working does. Well, I didn't have a summer job, but I mean, I feel your pain. I was a man child by 12, my brother kind of as well, 11 months older. And we were loaned out to everybody for any task you would want done for free. If you asked for money, my father would be there to pick us up. He didn't participate in any of said labor he loaned us out to. And he'd be there at the end to pick us up, and he would check to see if we had asked for any money, because that would be an ass whooping. So there was that. But yeah, the working in the summer kind of sucks because, I mean, summer's off when you're 16, 17, 18. I don't know if you know this, but it was kind of cool.
Yeah, some of them were. I mean, he didn't really push off that line. I mean, he had a view that he was not going to overly spoil me by any stretch of the imagination. So at those, I got the idea that pushing a mower sucked. And my next evolution up the ladder was scraping barnacles and painting boats, because I come from a boating family. And so I spent a lot of time in boat yards. And so, what I was able to do is, again, the money doing that is pretty good. But, so are the melanomas if you're colored like me. I mean, I sort of make Soren Endall look like.
Yeah, you and Soren are fairly the same complexion, which is to say translucent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can see the pancreas and the small intestines.
Yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that, Roddy. You should probably get that checked out.
A fiber-rich diet, they're clean.
So, Roddy, from there, your father unspoiled you to Fordham University?
Yeah.
He obviously believed in hard work and education. So you went to Fordham, graduated, as one does, and matriculated to where? To do what?
Believe it or not, the sort of defining thing of my, as a young kid is I remember my parents watching the Watergate hearings when I was 5 or 6 years old, maybe 6, 7 or something like that. And I remember thinking all that was really important. And so I wanted to do what led to creating Watergate hearings. And
break into buildings?
Exactly, yes. Well, not getting caught breaking into buildings. So I worked on petty thievery for any number of years. So I had it in my mind I was going to be a journalist from the earliest age, and I didn't really understand much about it. But when I got into high school and college, I just started, doing some journalism, doing reporting, and I had I'd been hired and was sort of part-timing at a local paper in Connecticut and kind of covering whatever they needed covered. And, fires, school boards, some late night crime stuff. And then my then girlfriend, now wife, got pregnant and I got married young.
So was it, you met your then to be wife in college or high school?
Yeah, college girlfriend. And so, again, another situation where my parents sat me down and said, hey, nice girl, we're excited to have a grandkid. Sex is wonderful. And by the way, you need to support this new operation of yours. And my dad said, I'm not writing checks for nothing. So I hop into Wall Street for the next 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so that's what you did.
I worked my way up from just a desk clerk.
And what did you? Well, desk clerk. Yeah, I imagine it's a lot of clerking behind a desk. So that couldn't be great. Where did you end up in that firm? You were there 5-6 years. Was it your dad's firm?
Yeah, he ran, and eventually through the miracle of sort of bank purchases and poor bank operational management, it became Wachovia Securities, and that took the great swim that required no towel after they bought the Sandler's Golden West Financial in I think it was 2006 for $26 billion, and away that went 9 months later. Right. But with that pick-a-pay loan of a portfolio of variable mortgages. Right. But coming up in the 1990s, Bethany McLean and I have talked about this at length. I mean, the sort of cultural issues of, asshole bosses and verbal abuse, that didn't exist in the early 90s.
No, it didn't.
I used to go to the kitchen and bring back, water bottles and soda and coffee and stuff. So they called me water fuck for a while. Wow. Like it was just like, okay, well, that's what you call I mean, it was that sort of, highly graphic, profane kind of culture. My immediate boss had worked for decades at Solomon Brothers, and he was just a big screamer, big phone smasher. And all of that taught me a pretty good lesson, which is I can tolerate anything after a while for a buck. Any amount of abuse.
Yeah, the guy wasn't even creative, right? I mean, he wasn't even it's not even really that funny. Like, here's a guy that brings water. Fuck. Oh, I will put those two words together.
Water fuck.
And I will call him water fuck. I mean, it was just mean to be mean, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was degrading to be degrading. And that was good enough, right? I mean, that was good enough. I mean, it was rough on me, and I had political connections there. I've talked with this a lot with Bethany McLean. I mean, it's to have been just a single woman in that milieu, the way she was at Goldman Sachs's mergers and acquisitions department, or any number of other people from that generation. I mean, I'm pretty astounded there weren't more suicides. I really am.
Did you say murders and acquisitions or mergers and acquisitions?
Oh,
mergers.
What's the difference?
Mergers.
What is the difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, non-shareholder value deal fee inducing transactions.
Yeah, it's interesting you had these conversations with Bethany. I don't know Bethany all that well. I met her one time, and I'm a big fan of her work.
You should have her on, man. I mean, she'll blow your socks off.
I've seen interviews she's done, and they've been great, and I do plan on asking her to join us. But you talk about the 90s for you being water F boy or whatever, and I've got to figure out how to say this in this day and age. But Bethany's not an unattractive person.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm just a pretty average looking schlump.
Yeah.
And yeah. I mean, it must have been brutal on her and some, I don't know other women in journalism from that era, but who came up through Wall Street. But I've met any numbers who've come up, in the last 15 or 20 years, when at least there were strictures, in place. There were at least, you couldn't like grab a woman's ass in public, which was the that was sort of that could be a done thing. That could be a done thing at a number of firms. And, it must have been brutal. I mean, it must have been.
Yeah.
I really, I'm
I mean,
not sure how.
she told you some stories and basically said it was that brutal for her, I'm sure.
I mean, it's brutal.
And we all
her
kind of
story's her own, but you're not wrong.
Yeah,
yes,
no, I would ask her about that. And everybody here kind of saw the 90s. I mean, I remember when I didn't like it.
Carl has often said to me, he's a person. He's not a piece of meat.
That is true. That is true.
Well, he's both. I will tell you a true story, though. I actually was in one of my early mid-level executive jobs. I was a regional manager. I was sexually harassed by my boss, and it was humiliating.
What?
Yeah. I was. It actually went down at the company. Like fellow female regional managers, my coworkers turned her in.
Wow.
And I did not want to talk about it. I was just like, it's fine. I mean, like whatever.
Oh.
But it was humiliating.
What's Carson's number again? I'm just.
Yeah, I don't know if I think I blocked it out until you just really brought it up. But it was
I mean, I'm sorry about this, man. It's not cool ever.
The therapy will start.
It was a big ordeal for like 6 months, and
that long.
Her punishment was we were in San Francisco office. Her punishment was they transferred her back to headquarters in New York. Just like get her out of the seat or whatever.
She suffered.
Yeah. But I can't, listen, I'm sure it's much worse for a woman, but it is pretty humiliating for a guy to be like, she's a bit out of control. All right. So from your illustrious trading career, you didn't want to stick with that. You didn't want to do that. You didn't want to be in the investment banking side.
No, I mean, I was miserable. I was profoundly miserable.
Right.
I managed to earn a decent enough income to take us out of abject poverty. Yeah. But I remember thinking the first chance I got to get the hell out of there, I took. And I remember thinking, oh, well, here's a 6-figure bonus. And now I'm going to be economically independent for the balance of my years on earth. And, what a fool believes, right? I mean,
where did you go? Where did you end up? You went up, you became a writer eventually, right? You didn't go right to the New York Post?
Fordham wasn't a really big journalism school. So I didn't know a whole lot of people in journalism, and I wanted to work my way up a ladder. So you had to go to New York City to do that. And so I just wrote letters to a bunch of places that I was aware of in 1998. Institutional Investor Magazine.
Yeah.
A bunch of other places, Forbes, Fortune, and TheStreet.com, which was just getting launched in, I think, that time. And the only two places that contacted me back were Institutional Investor Magazine and TheStreet.com. And they replied back like 3 months after I joined II. Mm-hmm. And I just began working my way up the ladder. I mean, I kind of created a deal. Because I had worked in Wall Street and I had a pretty decent numerical head for things. I was able to own, I was given the beat of the bond market, the fixed, sort of the non-convertible fixed income market. And I understood what a mortgage-backed security was, what a REMIC was, a collateralized mortgage, derivatives, things of that nature. And so I cut a deal with my editors. I said, look, I'll give you a decent flow of stories that we're not seeing right now. On the back end, will you allow me to do some deeper dive, some enterprise pieces? And they said, sure, but we're going to hold you to that first piece. And so I did. I mean, I was able to knock out my stuff by 3:34 and then, kind of put on a different hat and stay later or take it back on the train with me. And I was able to go after bigger game. And they honored the deal.
You're at Institutional Investor now. You'd gotten this job. What was your big get there at Institutional Investor?
Yeah. So I was, the big stories I wrote there were about, I had done a lot of reporting on the two giant mortgage guarantors, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae.
I've heard of them.
And they were in their sort of apex at that point of both real and soft power. And I noticed, I wrote stories about how they were opaque and sort of poorly governed and things like that. And
boy, were you wrong.
I know, God, yeah. Did no instincts. And I noticed something interesting. And obviously, over time, the thesis of my reporting was borne out. But I noticed something interesting. It moved the stock prices a little, but that's not what the companies were furious about. They were furious about their swap spreads getting wider, and which increased their funding costs, which made them, depending on where the swaps were, much less profitable. And the other thing that was interesting was that they were not terribly concerned about their stock price. And is because of some of the people that came over my bow that sent me emails and began a dialogue with me that you would recognize to this day, like guys like Jim Chanos, Mark Cahotis, and a few of the guys at Rocker Partners and stuff like that.
David Rocker.
Yeah. Those guys were very much of the view that because Fannie and Freddie were managing their earnings, there was nothing anybody could do that mattered to their stock price because they were guaranteed to have a 15% increase in operating income per year, no matter what.
Yeah, that's the thing about quasi-government agencies.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really. Well, I mean, they were government agencies when things got real, as the kids say. Right. Then they became government agencies. Yes.
So that kind of super interesting stuff. And then it takes you to the New York Post, which is, very, very...
Well, actually, it took me to the New York Sun. Oh. And I was there for a few years.
What's the difference between the Sun and the Post and the Times?
Yeah, no, it's a great... The Sun was a sort of funny... It was this broadsheet, like a very wannabe New York Times. But they had... it was owned by these... I guess you would call them neoconservative zillionaires, like Michael Steinhardt and a few others, Roger Hertog and Tom Tisch was of the Tisch family. And so, they had a really pronounced, op-ed view, but they allowed the reporters to do whatever. And they allowed me to do whatever the hell I wanted, which was really cool. And from there, I went to the New York Post business desk. And that's where I kind of really hit my pace. Certainly an interesting time to be alive, as a business journalist.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And I think your big fight there. I mean, you had many knowing you.
Many.
And feel free to talk about all of them, none of them, especially if the CEO in any particular case, strips down naked and sets himself on fire and runs down the street and says, "I stole all your money." If there are any of those, we want to hear it. But the closest thing I can remember to that, and I came into it a little after this fact, maybe around 10 or so, but was Patrick Byrne at Overstock.
I'm in 2005, I don't know, the summer of, I think it was 5. I was just sitting at my desk reporting whatever I was reporting, and a cousin of mine who was a bond trader emailed me, said, "You got to hear about this crazy conference call that one of my bankers told me about." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I don't want whatever conference call,
right.
Rather talk about dental hygiene or something." And
right.
But I had like 10-minute break. I mean, when you work in a place like that in your post, there's a lot of pressure. Yeah. And so I just sort of called up. I never heard of the company for the life of me. I called up overstock.com, looked up their conference call. I was like, I couldn't believe it. After 10 minutes, I was probably halfway through. I went and printed it out, brought it to my editor, a guy named Dan Colarusso, wonderful guy. And I said, Jesus, whatever came before, now there is this, because this is something else.
Well, remind all our listeners what exactly this conference call entailed.
Yeah,
Patrick Byrne spontaneously spouting.
Yeah, I mean, so the CEO of a very fast growing internet. It was I guess sort of a smaller competitor to Amazon in that they sought to sell just about everything. But they were originally, overstock.com was originally an internet closeout retailer, and overstock. And they would buy, like block trading, they would buy a ton of stuff that wasn't able to be sold from a dying department store, and they'd buy it in the whole and they'd, mark it up and sell it. I mean, totally valid business. And the CEO was he had this conference call and he went off on short sellers. He went off on Herb Greenberg. He went off on Herb Greenberg's now partner, a brilliant forensic accountant, guy named Don Vickery.
Yeah, he's great.
And he went off, I think it was, certainly went off on a bunch of reporters. And I mean, he spent much of the next 3 years going off on me.
And but like, I mean, the punchline is.
Oh yeah, the punchline. I'm sorry. I should. The punchline is that the capital markets were controlled by a Sith Lord. He called him a Sith Lord.
Yeah.
That ordered up hit jobs. I guess the Sith Lord, for all of his powers, also took the trouble to manage the long short fund, because he would call up.
Yeah, as Sith Lords do.
He would call up, as a semi-deity does, he would call up reporters to parcel stories out. He'd be like, look, today is, Tuesday the 19th. We're going after overstock.com. Next week, we're going after Take Two. The week after that is Taser. And the week after that is, some other, invariable piece of shit company. Again, the gift I had was I was able to, I knew what my way around a financial filing. So I just took home the annual report, took home their quarterly reports. And again, this is before smartphones and all that jazz. And I was like, yeah, this company's growing like a bullet, but it's
accounting is
no cash flow, increasing debt, and one hell of a weirdo as a CEO. And so I just started reporting around it, because I remembered one time when I was a trader in the early 90s, a company we were looking at banking had said to a couple of people in the pricing meeting, the CEO had said, I don't care who you sell it to, because the whole thing was you want to allocate shares to outright accounts like Putnam, State Street, Fidelity, above all Fidelity, ERISA accounts like, state pension funds, long-term, solid money, real money holders. You don't want, they call them fast money. Fast money was hedge funds. And so when you broke syndicate, you didn't want too much of the book going to hedge funds. We were looking at it was like a shit company, or I forgot what it was, but it was, we were going to have to move about a third of it to hedge funds, fast money. And this guy's like, he just started riffing on friggin' hedge funds and, crooked this. And he's using all kind of notionally anti-Semitic language, like Upper West Side liberal New York banker types, is like,
well,
okay,
how could that be construed Jewish in any way?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Seinfeld watchers, if not Seinfeld. And so the asshole boss I had at the time screwed the meeting up. We didn't wind up doing the transaction. And he said to me afterwards, he's like, if you ever see in your career CEO blame short sellers for operational problems, don't get angry. Don't do anything. Call stock, borrow stock loan, see if you can get about 200,000 shares of real stock and lay it out at the market, just short that stock. And so I really had that. I had that sort of DNA, and I went after Overstock. They made me and Bethany McLean persona non grata. That became litigation with BioVale, right? With a Canadian wonder company,
right?
And then from there became sort of the battle royale of all, which is I'd done a lot of reporting on a company called Fairfax Financial Holdings.
Yeah, Fairfax Financial.
And holy mother of God, did that launch
before we get into mother of God, Roddy, I mean, I do have to admit, like, as I was starting to say, in Patrick Byrne's defense, I remember the first time I realized the financial markets were being controlled by a Sith Lord. Darth Darren and Darth Carl here, same thing. But he also, on this call, as I remember, spontaneously announced that he was not on cocaine.
That was the second call. I had called
follow-up.
that was the second. I called up their investor relations guy afterwards, a guy named Kevin Moon, and I said, look, I have to ask you, is there anything I need to know or you want to disclose right now on the record about substance abuse or mental health?
Right.
Because he had Elliot Spitzer and Jim Cramer taking direct orders from the Sith Lord. I want to put out there that the Sith Lord was Mike Milken, who,
really?
I mean, a passable version of a villain. I credit where it's due.
I would give him a Darth status, Darth Milken. I'm fine with it.
Exactly. Overstock sued Rocker Partners. Particularly, they went after David Rocker for just the roadshow equivalent of a photo bomb. Overstock was peddling the deal at the 21 Club in New York City to institutional investors, and Rocker asked the question about increasing costs and no ability to convert it into cash while debt expenses are going up, which is eternally and evermore a pretty dire recipe for corporate health.
Right.
And, that kicked off that fight. I mean, which was funny because all the fights Rocker Partner ever had.
Mark Cohodes was in there too.
Cohodes launched them all. Cohodes and Monty, Mark Montgomery used to have a TV show with me, one of the first internet radio shows. Mm-hmm. And they just sat there and bashed companies that they were short and any company that they were looking at. And David Rocker is entirely different. He's from my father's generation, wore a Brooks Brothers suit to work every day. And
Yeah, that was the beginning of the end of that relationship, I think, with Rocker.
It led to it entirely. I mean, that was, that started there had always been a certain kind of management that would sue.
Don't I know it?
Mostly reporters. It was always, you never wanted to sue like a hedge fund that had money because they would turn around and hedge fund has money and lawyers usually.
Right.
But Overstock just used all of its working capital, right? And what was notable, I think, 16 years on, is it did two things. And here I'm deadly serious, not picking around. One, you could always get short, as a reporter, you could always get short sellers on the record talking about a stock prior to, sort of a battleground stock, like an Enron, WorldCom. You always could get, and there were dozens and dozens of short sellers that would discuss this stuff. The Fesh Fox, started it in the 90s.
82.
And then Joe and Tom Barton, did it too. And they just stopped talking because they began an entire wave of litigation focused on suing short sellers.
I joined that wave in 2011 as a defendant.
Yeah, you were on the second kind of evolution of that wave. And it also did another thing, which is it made the journalist the story.
Yeah.
Which that had never, from time to time, people would go after a guy named Jesse Eisinger or Alex Berenson before him. Certainly Bill Alpert used to get a lot of crap.
All really, really fine reporters and authors.
I mean, my God, Bill Alpert is a legitimately brilliant reporter.
He really is.
Jesse Eisinger is every bit his match.
Yep.
And I know Jesse. Jesse and I have become friendly over the years. And, like Bethany, let me not talk bear tails out of school, but many reporters who have really impressive reputations in a broader world are actually rather shitty reporters, but they're extraordinarily quick at self-promotion, or they're really good at Twitter. They just couldn't find their way out of a paper bag journalistically. And Jesse and Bill are not among them. Herb Greenberg, of course.
Well, Herb's in there as well, no doubt.
Chris Byron before them. But I mean, my God, those guys could play this game. Now, if you do financial investigative reporting on a material, serious sense, like you do original work, and here I'm going to, I'll go into the breach. I'll give you something you can, tweet out or something like that. A lot of reporters are taking, Patrick Byrne made a lot of accusations about all business reporters taking dictation from short sellers. And I got to say, I certainly am friendly with a broad sort of array of short sellers. I take dictation from none, and more's the pity were they ever to try and offer it. But a lot of reporters take some pretty gift wrap stuff from short sellers. And I have found that post Patrick Byrne, certainly post BioVale and Fairfax, if you're going to do original enterprise reporting on a battleground stock where there is a very public dispute between longs and shorts over either valuation and or ethics and governance, boy, oh boy, are you best have really good edit function and then, more importantly, legal review, because they're coming.
That happens to this day. I mean, we should talk about Dan McCrum doing that great job with Wirecard as well. And because he did,
someone else was involved in it. I forgot.
Yeah, I'm getting there, Roddy. Okay. You were the star of it. I mean,
I'm sorry. All these years in, that's the one.
Here's the difference, though, is that you do this day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the other byproducts of what you're talking about is by making the reporter part of the story. So many less reporters do it, right? So it was, and have done less and less of it since then. Here you've got McCrum coming out there working for, FT is big paper, and they went after FT. They went after him. I mean, like, they're still doing this shit. And it turns out, as you proved, along with others, that, they're a big old fraud.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, like, when you become part of the story one way or another, and those legal threats are coming across the bow, boy, oh boy, do you learn what the value of hard reporting is and the economic costs. See, there wasn't always when people thought of economic costs to investigative journalism, they thought about stuff like salary, benefits.
Right.
The same thing you do when you cost out a seat to add somebody at Wolfpack Research. Here's what this guy's going to bring in. Here's what it's going to cost. And you make a rational allocation of capital. That never had to happen before in journalism. And now, if you're bringing in, an investigative reporter at a place that doesn't have a deep commitment to it culturally and economically,
right.
And there's about 9 places left. I mean,
in the world.
Yeah, it's a lot of places say they do, and I'm telling you, I don't think there's 15 on Earth left. And my little goofy shuck and jive operation is one of them. Okay, I mean, for all our flaws, we are one of them.
Right.
And because I'm telling you, I mean, when you've cut to the bone your staff and you've laid off your proofreaders and broken union contracts and all that at the printing plant, I mean, you are not willing to take on, sort of
costly litigation, and it all costs.
It's 6-7 figures of cost, and
they really won. They really won because there are so many less of you today, and
I've had contact with Patrick Byrne over the last X amount of years, and in our conversation, I said to him, you won. You beat Rocker Partners because everybody ran out of money. So you all just agreed to go your own way. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you won. You completely changed the journalistic landscape.
You won because the financial crash happened at the same time as the lawsuit. And then Fairfax comes in and sues everybody. It's like that movie, The Professional, Gary Oldman. Everybody.
Yeah, I was the guy. I mean, I'm that New York reporter that led to the fucking thing.
Oh, it was Chanos, it was Stevie Cohn, it was you. I mean, you've been mentioned in all the best places. And this lawsuit actually went to discovery. And I guess, good for you, Michael Bowe at Kasowitz, though I will say, subsequent to that, in 2019, I whipped your ass in court. So there's that, Mikey. But on the Fairfax case, everybody came in and there was discovery, right?
Yeah.
It was pretty painful for most people. Now, what did they get out of you? I mean, what can they ask a reporter for in discovery? I mean, can you just say go pound sand?
They subpoenaed. I mean, I had learned to discount subpoenas. I got Herb Greenberg, I think a few weeks ago, talked about him getting a subpoena with Jim Cramer from the SEC. I got one of those too.
Oh, wow.
And so I just learned to say, okay, well, this is sort of the operating cost of doing business. It is what it is. And in 2012, after I had left the New York area and relocated to Wilmington, North Carolina, and begun sort of a new chapter journalistically, that's when they came after me. And so I had to use about $30,000 of my own money.
Fuck me.
But we fought them off. We fought them to the state Supreme Court, where they wanted my hard drive, my deposition, notes. They wanted to speak to my wife, get her, like if she had a phone or text or anything. And so we turned around and the state Supreme Court really affirmed a report, the right of journalism, and they were annihilated. Bowie sent a letter to my lawyer, who's still my lawyer now, and Ed West, and said, look, when we saw the strength of that opinion, we said, there's no way we're going to get through that, bank. We're not going to get through that.
Yeah. So that was in New Jersey where Fairfax lost to you guys. And then he tried to sue me in New York and lost there basically on the same grounds. So thank you for setting precedent a state over for us. That did help to a degree. So from there, since we're talking about CEOs who strip down naked and run down the street on fire saying I stole your money, we go to China.
Yeah.
Which is where I met you. Do you remember where we met, Roddy?
We met, if memory serves, I think it was 2011. It was at a conference that was put together, I want to say by Loeb. It was a panel put together by Loeb and Loeb at a conference they were having. It was a Mitch Nussbaum venture.
Yeah.
And it was me, you, Mitch.
No. Mitch was moderating. Mitch was moderating, and it was me, you against the room.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who you were. And like, put this into context. At the time, Sinoclean Energy was suing me, and Mitch was representing them as their attorney.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And he invites me to be on this panel with, I guess with you. I didn't know who was going to be there, what it was about. I was just basically like, yeah, fuck it. No problem. I'll be there. We're going to talk Chinese companies. I don't care if you're suing me, whatever. I'll go do this. And he moderated. It ended up being you and I, and Peter Cirrus was on the other side from Brillo Capital.
Mr. SEC problem, but it's all good.
Yeah. Yes. And some high up banker from Roth, and then some guy from, I think it was Credit Suisse or something like that.
Yeah.
And by this time, a lot had broken. Like you had China Media Express had broken, Sinoforce had broken.
Harbin was the big one.
Well, that Harbin was what they were hanging their hat on, because Harbin was going to be taken private. And that's why I think they were holding the conference, so they could say, see these reports that have been coming out for the last year, some of them are outright lies, like this one against Harbin. I remember meeting you and not knowing, I was sitting next to you, so I assumed we had some things in common. And then we just smashed that entire panel for the whole time with facts.
My defining memory of that panel was, there's a couple, but one is a Roth analyst saying they were really confident in all of their buy recommendations, which were 100% across the board. He took the trouble to add, because they had analyst staff based both in Beijing and in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And so they were really confident that there was no chicanery, which I laughed, and then you were smiling. The second memory I have there was they had the corporate secretary of Harbin was in the audience, and she was obviously a plant. And so I had written, I don't know, 11 or 12,000 words about what a fraud that was. I'd been through the factory, actually. And she just got up and started yelling and accusing. And I was like, lady, hang on, let's talk. So you leaned over and said, sit down and shut the hell up. You just started yelling at her. And so things got goofy. Mitch is not what you call a huge backbone guy. The third is really great, was your partner, Maj. Yeah. After everything's over, people come up, shake hands, give cards, whatever. He flips out and goes to this woman. He's like this skinny, mild dude, and just starts fucking hollering at her. Yeah. I was like, oh, hey, I'm pretending this isn't happening.
The conference is over. Everybody's standing up out of their chair. And Maj starts screaming at her from across the room. And what actually had happened is she was the U.S. based PR person for Harbin. And as a part of their going private deal, we had just realized like the week or two earlier, she was getting a $4 million payout as a part of this Harbin deal. And
that's right.
And what I ended up saying to her, I was like, listen, I didn't hear everything you just said right now. But what you were basically saying is we don't understand China because we're not Chinese and we don't know what we're talking about and it's cultural. Yeah. And I was like, but what we do understand is that you're a public relations person and you just got $4 million. Now, I don't know what they call that in the Chinese culture, but in the American culture, we call it hush money. So you should sit down and hush and take your $4 million. And then Mitch jumped in. But yeah, I thought the funniest part of it was, too, that Maj was just waiting for somebody to say, okay, goodbye, everybody, before he jumps up and just launches and starts screaming. And I'm just like, who is that guy?
How did he get here?
I don't know him.
This strange man.
But that actually was not the first time we met, Roddy. We didn't meet, but the first time I saw you was at the Roth conference at Fontainebleau, a wonderful hotel. I would recommend it to everybody.
Absolutely
Roth
beautiful.
Really does it right when they have one of these gigs. And look, I was still kind of a believer. I think that conference shed a lot of light for me on there were supposedly two different online education companies that had the only license in China, and each one of them was calling the other one a fraud in private. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on here. And then I go to this breakout, and this CFO is talking about his company, and somebody asked him what his guidance for next quarter was going to be, and he said, "What do you want it to be?" And then I see this translucent guy with light brown hair kind of jump up, it being Roddy, saying, "Oh, is that how it works? We just tell you what we want the numbers to be?" And take it from there, Roddy.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly as you said. I was there. The China Hustle didn't do the utter debauchery and just the moral failure in the air that place represented. I mean, in the exhibitor hall and at the center of it all was the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ booths, which just really,
they had competing booths to take these companies' listings.
I would stop by there 4 times a day. And the second time, I'd ask them, like, what are you doing morally, you degraded animals? And they would say, like, get out of here.
Yeah. I didn't remember that was you until years later, but I thought, wow, that guy's coming unhinged.
Balls on him, huh?
Yeah. Somebody should see about that. It's probably going to be a problem. Yeah. And they ushered the CFO right off the stage.
There were so many great breakouts at that. I met Ben Way for the first time.
Really?
Truly revolting piece of meat.
It's like, where were you? Like when you heard about Ben Way the first time or you met him? That became an epic fight with you and Benway. And I guess Ben had started with Carnes and Dune Lawrence and others. He dedicated a website to you. So congratulations for that. I mean, that's really, can you top this?
Thank you.
I cannot. So handing it to Ben a little bit, he was at some point like, okay, like freedom of speech, huh? Let me turn this shit on its head.
Yeah. Let's see what the traffic bears.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty proud of my reporting career. And if it ends tomorrow, I go to my maker and say I did what I could with what I had.
Yeah.
And certainly missed a fair amount of stories. Certainly should have dug harder on others. But Ben Way, I saw him from a mile distance and I nailed him. And I nailed him at the New York Post. I nailed him when I had a little goofy, the Financial Investigator blog. I nailed him, later on. And I got, again, don't ever believe reporters when they tell you they have a lot of contacts within law enforcement. There is a pretty strong wall between, especially federal regulatory and enforcement mechanisms, like especially Department of Justice and FBI, or U.S. attorneys on FBI. And on the Benway story is one of about 4 times in my career I've actually experienced when they come over and contact me. And the FBI reached out to me when they tagged him, when they raided his house and raided his firm. They gave me the story, so I was able to break it. But they quietly, in a very back channel, this isn't happening, but it's very much happening way, they said, let's just say there are constituencies within the building here, which is fully plaza where the FBI and U.S. attorneys are located, that read a lot of what you were saying, particularly when you got people on the record talking about funny wires to China.
Yeah. Well, look, I will say you did nail him. You nailed him like a Swedish model. I mean, it was, but I'm just joking with you, Ben, because, you have a thing for Swedish models, right? So.
Oh God, yeah.
But we to be fair to Ben, any charges that were eventually filed against him were dropped because of a Fourth Amendment violation of illegal search and seizure. So, like, hey, proven innocent. I mean, innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah.
And yes, you did some great work on that. And we should also mention that Bill Alpert did a great piece in Barron's on Beware the China Export.
Oh, Leslie Norton.
Yeah,
and Bill.
Bill did not get enough credit in the China hustle for that. He did a great job. You actually went to China to investigate some of these companies, and I remember you were telling a story about walking into the office of China Media Express CFO, and he might have been getting very familiar with himself, watching.
He was doing the Jeffrey Toobin.
So
doing the Jeffrey Toobin.
That's half right. So I walked into the China Media Express office, CFO office. It was completely abandoned. There was pieces of a desk. And, like when you're cleaning out like a bad move out situation, like when you're in college, you just have a pile of garbage. Mm-hmm. So I go into that pile of garbage and start pulling out documents because I was like, okay, I bet there's some stuff in here. And I got it translated. And I think some of it didn't matter. What was really funny is the lady giving us the tour, I was laughing at her. Okay. And so she got upset and left me alone in their executive offices. I just started walking around.
Yeah.
So I walked into an office where, first of all, the offices, they hadn't paid their heating bill, so it was 50 degrees. It was 55 degrees. I was freezing.
You got to keep warm.
Yeah, so I walk into one office, and there's like 2 workers that are, now this office did have furniture, I will stipulate, but it was a guy and a girl, and she was, I guess, helping relieve some tension of his.
Wow.
And, yeah. So
it was cold.
And then,
can you guys imagine this scene? This guy just, shut the door.
No,
I told you to lock the door.
I walk in and I'm with another guy. I'm with Brian Luter.
I remember that guy.
And who just, you'd have to invent him if you were pretty good.
Right. He was always at his iPhone, recording every conversation with these CEOs.
Yeah. So I walk in and this guy is, this Chinese guy is got the ultimate horror, walked in, totally surprised thing. I guess his female companion did not cease her engagement.
No.
And she was a true, that is grace under pressure. That was courage.
Yeah, well, she needed to move on with her life. So,
Yeah, and look, she's not going to let some...
She's not going to let you and Luter fuck this up.
Yeah, I was yeah. And Luter's not filming. We go a few offices down. There's 15 people asleep on the floor. And they have a laptop from the mid-90s. Yeah. And the lady who was giving us the tour comes back and explains, this is their R&D department.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's it. I start laughing, and then two security guards come up. Luter starts screaming at them, like the way Maj was hollering at that Harbin wench. And so it becomes, epic. I said to Luter, look, we're going to get in a lot of trouble in a very short amount of time. Let's just get out of, the entire city smelled like a fart. It was like, right. Oh boy, and so I wrote that story.
Well, okay.
And a day later, the entire,
oh my God.
I think NASDAQ stopped them. Carson came out with something. It was fucking excellent.
Okay. All right. Well, referred to a PR individual's bench.
Yes.
Insulted an entire city by saying it smells like a fart.
Like fart.
Check. Where else do you want to go with this, Roddy?
Exactly. I was just I was talking to Luter. I'm like, it can't be the entire city. Everything smells like poorly ventilated stall at the Arkansas State Fair. Yeah. But here we are.
Yeah. Let's throw a state in there. This is an equal opportunity to insult a state in the United States too. You're fantastic.
Arkansas had it coming, my friend.
Oh, my mother was born in Arkansas, you prick. All right. So anyway.
Ms. David, I truly am sorry.
That's fine. So it's a pretty interesting thing with the China-based companies. I don't think much has changed in the way of how we're viewed as a way to get a lot of money fast. And if you're not telling the truth, it's not against the law in China to steal from a U.S. citizen. So we still get some of these companies here, and they've taken some big ones. They've taken Ace Greenberg, I guess was in one. You wrote a book about him, Fatal Risk.
Hank Greenberg. Maurice Greenberg, Hank Greenberg, head of AIG.
No, it was Ace that lost on CCME, right?
Yeah.
What do you have against the Greenbergs?
I got along as far as any human could be said to get along with Hank Greenberg. I got along fairly well with him.
Yeah.
I would stipulate that, again, he is one challenging cat to get along with on an extended basis.
Right. But he knew you were writing a book about him.
Yeah, he knew. I was interviewing him, and he didn't really terribly much love when I would, say, look, I'll interview you for stuff, but then I'm going to do my own document work and I'll interview other people. And boy, he does not love the idea of being scrutinized.
You got access to all his personal files and everything that.
Yeah. Well, one thing Hank did that I would, I have to say, to my dying day, I'll say it. He said, I will plug you into either the old boy AIG networks coupled with, I will let you see a lot of the documents I based decisions off of. That was very, very helpful. It was also helpful that he opened up his network to me so that people who had been living in fear of him in one shape or another decided to open up their own documents. So it was, I wrote that book, Fatal Risk, in 2000. I think it came out in 11 or 12.
11.
And it was honest as hell. I mean, it really
good
looked
book
at the global financial crisis rationally. I could have made about another 100,000 large if I had decided to take a drop on Goldman or, any of the other idiots, but I didn't. I played it straight down the middle. And of course, I think there's about 11 people alive who read the thing.
That's not true.
There's 15, Dan.
Well, I
right.
know 11 of them who have read it. And
Exactly.
Look, history repeats itself. So it is a worthwhile effort on your part to go back and read Fatal Risk. It's really looking pretty bubbly out there. And
You ain't kidding.
these companies and banks that were too big to fail, remember, they're bigger now, and they're in some cases bigger than countries. So have a look at that and see where we are today with our debt, and where we are with our relationship with China, and past the shenanigans that you and I personally know about a lot of China companies. That's where most of our conversations have happened over the years. But I think your seminal work in the last 4, 5, and 6 years have been, one, a little less interesting because it's been so talked about, Valeant Pharmaceuticals, but you were the first on it. And then I think really awesome work, award-winning worthy, is Insys Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Where, people were dying, and you were on that for years, where you give that attention that can take years, where short sellers just like, hey man, I'm moving on to the next thing. So tell me a little bit about Valeant first. It's interesting. Everybody gives Andrew credit for breaking Valeant, although in his report he references you. And quite frankly, I don't know that his report was completely accurate. I don't know what you have to say about that.
So, I got on that I'd been watching these large funds, long and short, throw bolts at each other. Bill Ackman pounding his book, Pershing Square founder, on owning a huge block of Valeant, and I'd watched, let's say, Jim Chanos was very clearly, very publicly discussing its problems. And credit where it's due. I don't truly like the guy very much at all, but John Hempton had to. He did, very interesting work on that Bronte Capital, and he deserves a lot of credit for that.
We don't like John Hempton now?
John and I've had a parting of the ways.
Oh, you fell out,
mentally.
Huh?
I personally had no problem with him, but he took a lot of profound offense to what I wrote about a guy called Fraser Perring. And
okay. All right. Well, I fell out with him before I knew him. So
I was there when you fell out.
Still don't know, don't care.
So I'm just sort of setting that stage. And I knew something was horribly wrong with that roll up, and I spent months hunting for a sort of a way in, and I found it very, very late at night on a message board for pharmaceutical industry people. And I found just a simple question: what is Philidor? Except the person asking the question was like a regional manager for Valeant sales. Mm-hmm. And I figured, if a regional manager doesn't understand what on earth Philidor is. So I spent a bunch of time looking at it. I actually was in your neck of the woods. It was about 5 miles from you.
Pissed me off when I found out about that. That was actually the first time I was really a legit pissed at you.
Yeah, Horsham. I was up there door knocking and stopped in unannounced to their facility. And I wrote about an entity called Philidor, which was an insurance fraud on one end, and it was a regulatory fraud on the other, it was designed to get around pharmacy ownership rules. Mm-hmm. And I was able to get a copy of a hearing in California where the founder of Philidor had been caught publicly lying about who owns Philidor and its connection to Valeant. And I found a lawsuit where Valeant was demanding $70 million from a two-man pharmacy, for some reason. And
as one does.
I mean, the funny thing about that, I would have been able to put that story out a week earlier, but one of the sort of hallmarks of the reporting we do at the Foundation for Financial Journalism, we give people very ample chances to respond, very detailed, here's what we're writing, here's our sources on it. And they screwed me around for a week, and then they pushed up their earnings to pre-announce what Philidor was. So I beat them into press. And it was one of those deals where I went to drop my kids off at school, and I came back and there was, I probably, 70 emails I had and 30 phone calls. Andrew left, was like, take it down. I've got a bigger report. Well, I'll cut you in on the puts I own. But I'm like, Andrew, I'm a reporter. Leave me alone.
Wow.
Shut up.
Wow. Wow. You just dropped some shit on Andrew, by the way.
And Andrew and I've known each other for decades now. I like him. He's a friend of me on one end.
Other than he tried to bribe you with puts, he
was
wonderful.
very clear. Look, how much stock are you short? I was like, what?
Well, he knows you're not. I think he was trying to make a point.
Wait, Andrew, when have I ever done that? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so, I knew it might have like an impact. I didn't know that, it would set off what became
right.
Crazy. It's crazy.
My aha moment with Valeant, and my Valeant story is a terrible one. Weeks before you published and snuck around my backyard without calling me, I had read a blog called AZ Value Investor. Really went after the accounting.
Remember him? Yes,
you do. Really went after the accounting of Valeant for over a year or two. This guy was just like really going in, and I come into work. And I'm like, hey, man, I really want to look into this. And one of the people working here felt like they had a close relationship with Bill Ackman. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And he's like, nah, listen, it's a shit company. I don't agree with him, but like, this is really going to screw up my relationship. And I'm like, you don't have a relationship, buddy. So, it just became a back and forth, and I'm like, okay.
Billionaires don't have relationships.
Okay. The fucking guy wants to call you and talk about whatever interests him on something. When you lose that mutual interest, you'll never speak to him again, basically, which is, I think, close to what happened. But I'm just like, how much do I want to fight about this? So we moved on to something else, and you guys absolutely killed it, right? And I'm sure, God bless, Andrew made, tons of money. I know you don't short. Everybody should realize that you are not invested. Unlike the rest of us who do make the money. We'll get into your business model, which is extremely flawed. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But the Bill Ackman conference call, because I thought, okay, here we go. This thing's dropped to $100 now, maybe 110. It's in half, 50%. And now we got a week later, and this guy's putting a conference call on for the world. And, this is going to squeeze. This is going to be a pop here. Something bad's going to happen to anybody short. And he says nothing. And in the middle of saying nothing, orders lunch, like around the table.
That's right.
Yeah. He was like, okay,
wow.
Like we haven't said anything for over an hour here. And what about you, Frank? What do you want? You want the gnocchi salad? I like the Cobb. The Cobb's a good one. What about you, Janice? Yeah. Would you think you're just gonna have the same brie sandwich? I'm like, what is going on here?
The other part of that is that I think is great to your point, Dan, is he also had a 3-minute on the record aside about the temperature of the room. He's like,
right.
How?
Right.
He's like, I pay for the, like, he's upset about,
right.
Could you please raise it, or somebody bring me a sweater? I was like,
I'm feeling a bit chilled. Hey, you, can you take your sweater off and give it to me? Does anybody have a blazer, an ascot maybe? It was crazy. And you had to think these people on the other end of the phone that want this to go up and have so much money in this just had to be killing. The stock just tanked. It went down to 80, I think, in short order before it just completely fell apart. But what a douche. I mean, to come out as the moral high ground on Herbalife, and I think he was right about that one, by the way. But
Yeah, I generally do too.
yeah, and using morality as an argument and then defending Valeant so badly. No morality in that company that I could see was, well, a bad look, we call that in the business.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I mean, but it's not even just defending the morality of like sort of addressing Herbalife as a particularly vile scourge upon Latino and
Yeah.
you know, sort of people, you know, the lower income strata of America.
I agree with that.
Again, I feel he had some fact sets there
agree.
that were very meritorious. And then he turns it around. I'm like, oh yeah, there's no healthcare economic costs in America. You know, like no one is vexed by the American healthcare system. And you know, $1,500 a quarter for toe fungus. I mean, for foot fungal cream and stuff like that. I mean, it was
well, marking it up. It was an old product that they, you know, marked up 1,500 times. Everybody knows the story.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, and Valeant just is more of a cautionary tale about these high flying. You know, I mean, as Chano said, right? I mean, where are you looking for fraud first? Probably CapEx and roll ups. I mean, roll up is
eternal.
It's eternal.
Nevermore.
But I think, I mean, look, I know you've done some great work throughout the years. You've had a very long career. You even wrote nice stuff about Dick Fold at Lehman Brothers. By nice stuff, I mean, you eviscerated him.
Yeah, thank you.
And having said that, like that's going after a tough guy. I mean, if your name's Dick Fold, you got to be able to fight.
Yeah.
You
Dick called me after the Tuesday after the story came out. We were at Fortune, and he said, you know, he's like, I bet you feel pretty good about yourself. Like you live in Brooklyn with all those hipsters.
Yeah.
And I said, what?
I feel good. My name's not Dick Fold. All right. So I think your most seminal work that I've seen out of all of it is Insys Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Here's a drug that absolutely killed people. I mean, like, you know, it was off-label marketed and people died. And you're the one who really stayed on it. And what a story of like what this company is.
Yeah, I spent a year. So, I mean, again, you and I have been sort of in fairly constant contact on and off for the last, 11 years, simply because we have the same, I think, moral outrage at the state of affairs.
Oh, I thought we were friends. I didn't. I always get confused about that shit.
No, we like each other. I mean, I'm saying, but we share the anger of the injustices we encounter.
Right.
And you decided to actually do something about it. You saw the system, it didn't work, and you actually tried to do something about it, which is very unusual.
Still trying.
Affluent business class, and it's a lot easier to funnel money to a 501c4, trust me. And I was reporting that story, and the organization I worked for, at that point we were called the Southern Investigative Reporting Foundation. We were completely bankrupt. I hadn't drawn a salary in 4 months.
I remember that.
And so I came home from work one day, and there was a woman sitting at the table, it's like 6 o'clock at night. And my wife said to me, I don't think I've ever shared this. My wife said, Roddy, I really believe in what you're doing, but we need to eat. Like it was
right.
Like the kids were the two younger kids were talking about like the holes in my pants and stuff. And so my wife said, we can't take this anymore.
Who was the woman you're talking about?
So we took money out of the house. I owned a house, but we took some money out of it.
Wow.
She took my salary for 18 months out of it. And I was able to take some of that money and go to Arizona and Southern California for weeks at a time. And I did, I did a lot of document work, as those stories I think would attest.
Yeah.
But I also went retail. I also found where people lived and door knocked them and showed up. I mean, one woman who worked there also like earned a little extra money as a stand-up paddleboard instructor at a lake at a dam in Arizona. And I would just go to her yoga class, and I would And I got to talk to her.
Get your namaste on.
I got former salespeople to talk to me, current salespeople. I got actually one of they have all organizations have like top tier award, the Diamond Club, the President's Club. I got a member of the President's Club to talk to me on the record. And that was because I had built the credibility of being face to face with him. I'd shown some balls in attacking a high flying stock.
Right.
But that was my job, but I was able to actually be around where these people lived and meet them for coffee. And I just was able to stay on them. And could you just show me what you mean by that? Like in that memo, could you just give me your notes from that? And so I was proud of that work too. And I did all of 2015 and 16. I spent, with exceptions for writing about like clogged toilets, like Valeant or something. Yeah. And I was really proud of that. I did 4 or 5 very extensive investigative pieces. And it's funny, I'm not a very much an audience response guy, but I was looking at my initial, I was getting 10, 20, 30,000 unique likes, by the end of it, where I have internal audio of the company openly discussing multi-state insurance fraud. And people, I was getting like 6,000 likes. People are like, yeah, whatever. And it was just, I would get these teasing emails from investment bankers, from analysts. Like one guy said, look, pal, you don't know what you're doing. I think you got a good heart, but you just, this is an upstock. It's an opioid company, single name pharma, they call the specialty pharma companies. They're here to stay. You're giving me a good buying opportunity. And I would say, can I talk to you on the record? And of course they'd all go away then. Right. But I mean, I just remember that as like, I really, look, I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve and I goof around on Twitter and stuff like that. And I goof around when I generally get together with you and other people who are friendly, like Carson and stuff like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, I've made profound economic and personal sacrifices. Yeah.
You did all this for the low price of mortgaging your home.
Yeah. And I just remember the end of that series as being sort of like the end of World War I for like the French or the British, like, right. It just, the shooting stopped. And I thought no one cared anymore. I had more, I still have more stuff and I'm still getting more stuff. And I remembered all of that when I was up in Boston for the trial of all these people. And I walk in the first day of the trial, I kind of got pulled aside by some people and they shook my hand. And it still means something to me because at this point in my career, I'm just taking moral victories, right? I mean, there's no suggestion that this foolish thing I do is going to be economically independent, but no. But the DEA, it was the senior DEA officer on the case, the senior person from Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, the FBI, and one of the 3 federal prosecutors that were trying the trial. And they just said, look, we're going to be here for a while. It's going to get ugly. We can't deal with you now, but we just wanted to shake a hand. Yeah. And that had never happened to me.
Very cool.
To the extent that I can take that memory with me into my end of days, I will be a rich man. I mean, because again, that's just not a thing and that kind of stuff happens like when you see actors portraying reporters in movies. It doesn't happen in real life. I can tell you that.
No, that's a very Hollywood thing. And that it happened to you is well deserved. You wouldn't expect that kind of thing.
No, never.
That they would recognize you, know you, or, last but not least, appreciate you. So that is very cool.
Feels like it could be a second book for you, Roddy.
Yeah, we're, based on the sales of my first one.
I think you should write about, take a collection of Valeant, Insys, and a few others, and then also a standalone China thing you should do. But that's just my opinion. So what you do, it was a Southern Foundation Investigative, way too long of a title. Yeah. It's now called the
Foundation for Financial Journalism.
There you go. Much shorter, to the point. And you don't trade. So I've known this about you since, 11 years ago. It's baffled me back then. It baffles me even more today. But you rely on donations. And even after doing something like Valeant and Insys and all the China stuff you did, and then there are a whole bunch of other things that you've done that are just as important, maybe not so much as Insys. You got your cup in your hand. Come to my website and, give me money for honest work. And nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to donate, but they want to bitch about me shorting and how much money I make. I mean, it's my question is, what is your problem? That I pay myself to do my job, or how much I pay myself to do my job? Because Roddy's got a different model that asks for your kindness as an investor for honest work, and you're not giving them anything. Sorry, that's my rant, Roddy, but I think your business model's fucked.
You're really clear about what you do. You disclose everything up front, and you make clear, and I know this about you, that the kind of stuff that Wolfpack Research does now, and then geo investing before you did, is just incredibly intensive. And now you've got, an element of political risk involved, and it's not easy. It is heavy lifting.
Well, look, I didn't mean to veer that into woe is me. I'm woe-ising you.
Woe is me, but that's eternal, right? I mean, look, I because I approach management and I tell management, look, if you can tell me that, the 5 people I've interviewed, and by the way, here are the notes from them, and and all that stuff, and here's what I'm looking at in your disclosures. Here's what I found in a footnote to a litigation or exhibit. Right. If you can say, hey, look, there's an argument here, it's nuanced, but hear me out, I'll always drop it, and I think that the company understands I'm not trying, their equity price, or, going back to Fannie and Freddie, their swaps or bond prices, none of that matters to me. Also, I'll be as tough to a short seller and whatever line of shuck and jive they're peddling as I will be to.
I think I read an article about that. Yeah.
And I mean, look, how many times can I be pitched Tesla? That's one example.
I know. I mean, you're
come invest in Stalingrad and die, they said in 1943.
Yeah, and that's true. But with you, listen, I have plenty of money because of the model that I incorporate in my work, and then your model is for donations, and you're putting your house up. And, I know that's still a struggle for you, Roddy. And then I guess, look, I mean, we got to talk about everything, including controversies. At one point, I guess a couple of years ago, there was a generous donor, gave you a donation of stock, of all stock, overstock.
Yeah, of all stock.
And it turned friend into foe all over the place. People just came after you. People are not giving you a dime. I was always catching shit for giving you a few $1,000s a year. I don't think I ever gave you more than 5 or 10 grand. And you would catch shit over it. I would catch shit over it. You're paying them off. And I'm like, look, man, I'm just trying to donate here. And then you had this happen. What was that like?
I mean, that was miserable because, it was really, really nasty. Mark Cohodes went from being at some point a skeptic of Patrick Byrne and Overstock. He became a very large investor, and he went to a conference, Grant's Interest Rate Observer Conference, and said it's going way the fuck up, and it did in fact. And then it started off a firestorm, and at the end of that year, 2017, I was actually folding Surf Up, Southern Investigative Reporting Up. I was like, look, you take a message from the world. It's people don't want to donate to this. It's obviously not something that matters tremendously. And so I had I notified the board, and I had begun the process of closing the 501c3 with the IRS and the state charitable solicitation license from North Carolina. And Cojones, I never mentioned anything to him. He just calls me out of the blue one day at the end of December 2017 and says, I'm making a donation of 5,000 shares. He was offended when I said, I need to step back. We need to have a board meeting about this. Can we discuss? He's like, is my money not good? And we had a board meeting. We agreed to do it. We sold the 5,000 shares at market. Of course, the stock went ripping, so it gave up like another 40 points. But we're not investors. It was about a $30,000 net. And so two guys on the internet, but other people as well. A guy named Gary Weiss, a very at one point prominent business journalist, a former professional friend of mine, and Sam Antar, who was the CFO of the Crazy Eddie scam, and at one point was a legit personal friend of mine and personal friend of Mark's. And
that seemed pretty bitter.
It was by the end of it, they're just like, I'm a whore, I'm a scumbag. They were
children got brought into it. It was.
Yeah, I just dropped it. I was like, okay, guys, whatever you say, I am. But look, you're right. I need to be economically independent from asset valuation, and I need to be not profiting from what I write about in a direct way. I would argue.
I need just the opposite, by the way.
I would argue my reporting is direct and clear.
Yep.
And it doesn't, I'm a critic, but I'm not frothing at the mouth. I'm not trying to be like some activist short sellers are.
Roddy, though, it's almost like it's farcical. You're set up. You're like a unicorn. And I've seen some instances where they've just flat out accused you of, well, who's paying you? Who are you working for?
That's every day.
It's like, no.
And the real trouble is about the model is I can never get to a certain large amount where you can go to the prominent funders of civic center journalism, like the MacArthur Foundation or the Google Foundation or the X and the Y, MacArthur, all these prominent names you see at Frontline or something like that. And it's so,
and you've tried.
I had a great interview.
You've tried with all of them, right?
I've tried. I had a great interview with an absolute name brand foundation. You would know it in a minute. And I went up, put on my best Brooks Brothers suit and cleaned up real nice, went there and interviewed. And they were like, oh, we love this. This is awesome. We need somebody standing up direct, nose to nose with corporations. And I totally read I think without hyperbole, I think I have some level of neuroatypicality because I viewed them as like saying that's like they are going to give me money. So I brought that up. I was like, okay, well, can we just sort of war game out what like a funding project might look like and what's involved? And they looked at me like, like I was talking in Aramaic, and they said, oh, are you kidding? No, we would never fund you. And I'm like, what? We were just loving each other a second. And they were like, yeah, no, that kind of nose to nose trench fighting, that's just litigation. Like we don't want any of that. The Ford Foundation funds thematically, and they pitched me an idea. And I guess
I would recognize the name Ford Foundation.
Yeah.
And you know what, Roddy? You should have taken me with you because I speak Aramaic.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they said to me, and here's my Coptic intern, Dan.
You go.
And so they said, like if you had Blackstone or a Goldman Sachs funded thing that was exploiting like Indian casino loopholes or something, would you be interested in investigating that? And I was like, look, I'm down with what's the victimization of what's going on in the reservation, but I gotta go where my story leads me, and I don't have that story, and I don't know that that's a real story either. And so that was many years ago, and I've never even gotten close to those people since. And so you need a real pilot. And I'm totally an idiot, right? I thought launching this thing, people would be like, oh, hell yeah, I'm a retired guy, whatever. I worked at Merrill Lynch. I'll write this guy a $10,000 a year check. It's all good.
Yeah. Not so much.
At the end of the day, it's like, I'm a fool. I just go back to framing houses off the books, I think.
Yeah.
Probably work out
well,
better.
I think that's probably, yeah. I mean, just people, they don't care. There's a bias in everything everybody does, including you. Like everybody's got their bias. There're just not enough people that want critical research. And I believe you're going to have a hard time with that and always will, I guess at this point I could start donating again because I just don't care anymore.
No,
right?
we're not talking about that. That's not.
All right, fine. I won't then. But Roddy,
Carl doesn't come cheap, man. Think about what it costs to keep him in a seat and what he's going to demand next year.
I have to tell you the big, and I say big with Carl, bonus is that he's so cheap. It's a great value. Look, we could go on, and I'd like to have you back, certainly joining on panel discussions, like with a couple more funny people, like a Herb,
sure.
Whatever. But one of the things that I so admire about you, I want you to talk about for just a second, is you're a sober guy.
Well, I am now. I wasn't for a while there.
Yeah. I mean, before we get into, the kind of nice work you do being a sober guy, please give us the most interesting non-sober story as it relates to a journalist. Did you, ever smash a glass on a CEO's head while you were on a bender or?
I wasn't an everyday drinker, but when I drank rather heavily, and I drank, I'd say 3 to 4 nights a week. Uh-huh. Journalism and drinking are bedfellows because you put a source near booze.
Right. They loosen up.
The loose lips really help float my ships. Yeah. And so I would drink hard with bond traders and portfolio managers.
What does drink hard mean?
So I drank 2 things primarily. I liked Bass Ale type beers. And this is before this
so heavy
micro custom craft bespoke brew revolution. So you had to go to Irish pubs to get that stuff.
Right. Guinness and Bass.
And I liked red wine and a little, when things were going nutty, a little, let's say, scotch or tequila.
Right.
And so I met a guy, it was a friend of a source who knew a lot of what I needed to report on. And I was drinking heavily with the source. And this friend who had all the information and all the documents, he wasn't really drinking a lot. And he was giving me some stuff as he began to loosen up. And finally, I was kind of getting tired of his sort of sobriety, of his caution, of his, reasonable concern about talking too much near a reporter. And I just sort of grabbed this guy. And I put my hand on him and I said, I have a wife and 4 kids, and I'm actually 3 kids at that time, and I'm pretty desperate to get to a bigger, broader, place to do my reporting. So you need to make a decision whether you need to be friends with me, you want to be friends with me, but you've got to be friends with me. Or you're going to have a lot of problems.
Wow. What a dick.
The couple of people at the table were friendly with me.
Yeah.
This guy actually blinked and he became a regular source because he was just petrified. Because I told him, I said, I'm just going to put your name near stuff you said already. And we'll see who wins. See who the First Amendment was there for. Ooh, and a couple of people at that table were like, I don't know how I feel about that, man. Right. I don't know how I feel about that.
Right.
And that was about 2 months before the end.
Yeah.
I was starting to go across guardrails,
Yeah.
I was starting to cross lines that didn't really want me to cross type of thing.
You look back on that as a kind of seminal moment of regret you had, that you weren't as professional as you need to be and live in your own body.
Yeah. I again was letting the animal fears and resentments that existed in my body, the anger, the fact that I felt I should be at a Wall Street Journal or New York Times but I'm not. And so I decided to sort of hotwire the process by threatening a guy. Yeah. And I look back on it and say, I certainly, when I sobered up in March of 01, and began the process of a 12-step based recovery, I did contact this guy and I explained that I never would have done that, but I caused him harm and pain, and I sincerely regret that. He was very generous and engaging with me, but I could tell. I'm pretty sure that if you get this guy alone, he's going to just be like, that guy's a madman. He's never gonna. And I realize that's, I have to own the fact that I scared people like that. I scared people I loved and harmed people I loved, and I did worse. I drank too much and drove. I got in a lot of arguments, and I hurt. I should have paid. Although my bottom was low enough, I should have paid a much greater price than what I paid.
Well, you don't often hear people say that. That's an interesting retrospective. It's the one thing I really do. I do hate about the 12-step program is the, apologizing to all the people you've ever threatened.
Making amends. They don't apologize.
That would take a long time.
That's a tough one. If we could move it down to 11 steps.
Yeah, it's been said by many men and women over the years.
Roddy, I think that was.
I decided to, because I'm a reporter, and alcohol is so integral to so much reporting, and it's internalized at such an early stage in a reporter's career. As a young reporter growing up, you're like, I'll just take this guy out for drinks, or I'll take her out for drinks.
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of reporters and people in journalism and media, unsurprisingly, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, develop some fairly compelling problems, central to, they add in pills, or now it's weed. And so people, I found that, certainly on Wall Street, this is it's not a visible problem, but it's right there. And so I decided to do something a lot of people don't do, which was I decided to break anonymity and try and connect with people who might be, because I have to tell you, the last 3 or 4 months where you could not, I woke up and went to bed every night in a jail of my own making. And it was lonely and bitter, and I know what that's like. And I have to say, it's, maybe this is inappropriate for me to say, but in the sort of amalgam of people in media and people in finance and people adjacent to both law or forensic sciences and stuff like that, what we call financial Twitter or FinTwit. I can tell you, I know 3 people who have committed suicide. And it's always like another story, right? It's always, they passed on suddenly. Well, yes, it was a sudden death. That is the nature of suicide. Yeah. But it's like no one was talking about this. Yeah. No one's talking about the fear and anger and isolation.
Did you ever have any of those thoughts, Roddy, in those last 3 months before you quit? Did you?
I never thought of suicide. Uh-huh. But the thing is all of those not yets, well, I didn't do this, so I'm not an alcoholic. Those were dropping every other week.
Right.
Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I used to tell my wife, she'd be like, there's a big dent in our minivan. Or I'd be like, oh, damn it, Laura, every time I go to Whole Foods, one of these rich Greenwich women just put the shopping cart in the side. And, and the thing is I was drunk the night before.
Well,
and hit the garage,
you could also have a nicer minivan if you didn't shop at Whole Foods. Just so you know. But
whole paycheck. Yeah. Yeah. And so, it was like all of those things, those lots of lies. I'm going to give you another one because I've shared this publicly. My young children who are now married and have wonderful, rich lives of their own. One of them, my daughter, did a drawing. It was draw your own kitchen. And she had a recycling bin and a shelf full of empty wine and beer bottles. And so my wife just showed it to me one night. And she said, yeah, pretty nice kitchen we have. And I was like, that's a good drawing. Oh. Yeah. And she's like, yeah, well, the teacher was asking us, hey, she's internalizing some things here.
Right.
Like,
that had to be
and
tough.
I was like, God, that just friggin',
Yeah.
and I couldn't stop. So I said, I won't drink this week, Laura. I promise. She, at that point she was on my case. And of course I drank, to excess 3 nights later or 2 nights later.
Right. Cause you have to get it all out right before you quit. Right. That's what people say. And then they don't quit. And listen, I can see the pain on your face for sharing that. And thanks for sharing that with us.
No, I mean, look, I mean, it's the war I fought. It's not the war other people fight, but it's like,
it's a war a lot of people are fighting, Roddy. And and one of the reasons I bring this up is because I think you sent out a tweet a month ago, 2 months ago, something like that said, hey, look, I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery for over 20 years or something of that effect. And if you're somebody who has a problem and, on FinTwit, you need somebody to talk to, I could be there for you. And I saw that tweet. What's the response been?
I've been humbled. Okay. I was surprised. I figured maybe somebody would say something, ask me one question. It turns out a lot of people had been, I don't want to say wrestling with this, but have had this issue at some point. And I've been able, I would say at least 5 or 6 people I've had a substantial dialogue with, and A, to hear them out, B, to just share some of my strength, hope, and experience. And a couple of those people there's a couple that really kind of seized the bit and said, I got to stop. Like, it's not all me. Because one guy in particular he'd had about 20 not yets in a 10-day span. And he just called me up frantic. He's like, I found your number on some web, and I talked to him for hours. And then I talked to him the following morning for hours. And he's, I was able to be on his Zoom call when he picked up his 1-year chip.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And this was a guy who's getting ridden out of his house on a fast horse, and another guy was able to give up a certain drug habit he had. And I've been talking and engaging with him, and he's at 6 months, and a couple other people, was able to talk to him into I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but you can speak to me and I will die with it. I was able to talk to another couple of people, and they were able to, kind of confront certain animals that they're wrestling with and, begin a process of like inpatient therapy, or one person went to rehab. And again, it's just, so many people in Wall Street and certainly in media pride themselves on their endurance and their toughness and the way they sort of express their humanity at night or alone is to, abuse drugs or alcohol or, I also, I have anxiety and depression all in my background. And I had to spend a few weeks putting that together at one point. And I know what that looks like. And I'm a pretty driven man. I work as hard as anybody else. And the animating thing in me is an outrage. It's a wolf that I walk. I can, because of a variety of different things, I'm able to keep the hatred and the anger, and the malice. I'm able to spiritually walk away from that and go after wrongdoing for the right reasons in my way and on my time. And that's, that's a gift from a God, a higher power, whatever you call it. But other people don't have that. And so I'm able to kind of engage with them. And that's been meaningful because it's such a silly bridge to cross, but so many won't do it.
Well, look, it's as important as the work. It's as important as the work you did on Valeant or Insys. one person at a time. And at this time, people are shut in, they're drinking more.
Oh, I mean,
they're doing a lot.
Geez, what a variable.
You shared a story. You certainly didn't tell me who it was, anything about it. You just said, look, a person had called me. I don't know if it was last year or last week, but they're like, I saw your tweet and I thought I'd reach out. I don't really think I have a drinking problem. I black out every once in a while.
Twice a week.
Twice a week. Okay. I mean, like I think I don't remember blacking out once, because saying I remember blacking out once doesn't really make much sense to me. But I think there was one occasion where I had a lapse in memory, and I was, I was like, 20, 18, 19, 20, back when, it was, probably it was legal to drink in Hawaii. So, but for somebody, for that kind of, wow, man, twice a week. Have you ever had a blackout, Roddy?
Yeah. When I was able to say to him, this is a language I can speak.
Yeah.
And, it was an opportunity to say, look, I'm a guy on Twitter. You don't know me. I'm a reporter. You can look at my work. But yeah, I know what it's like to wake up on the floor of a bathroom and vomit. Oh. I know what it's like to have scared kids.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to somehow talk your way out of a DWI. And I know what it's like to, another story. I mean, I had walked into a family party once. I remember hearing my sister and my mother and my godmother, oh yeah, Roddy just walked in, and I was standing right behind him. I was getting a drink, of course. I was
sure,
because it had been about 40 seconds, and I needed to be at the bar. That the family party means a family bar.
Well, you were around family. That makes me drink too.
And I'm getting, a drink, and I heard them saying, "Oh, we love Roddy, a great guy, love the family, this, that, the other thing." And they said, then they all said it once, but Jesus, 5, 6 drinks, he's going to get angry, or he's going to start telling, BS tales and stuff. And it's just like, it's nutty to hear your 3 closest relatives that aren't your wife saying, like, yeah, give him 20 minutes and then it's going to start.
And he's, so you were an angry kind of drunk.
Yeah. I'm just going to get angry, and I'm going to settle things. I'm going to put people right.
Yeah.
And all will work as I foresee in my plan.
Right.
And turns out that, yelling at people or bringing up resentments from 1977 really doesn't always work to your advantage in a family dynamic.
No.
And the other one that hurt was, they were like, oh, well, if he doesn't get angry, he'll just drink a lot more and just tell BS, bullshit stories. And that hurt too.
Yeah.
I needed to work on my integrity and seriousness of purpose. And I realized that, eventually March of 2001, I realized that, the smart money was betting against me, So,
well, I mean, that's pretty amazing, because you were like 30 years old, 32 years old. You were a young man back then. To realize that soon, I mean, that could go a lot of different ways. And I really appreciate you being so open and honest. And I hope that, somebody that's listening that maybe thinks they do, or maybe thinks they don't have a problem, there are people like Roddy out there you can talk to. There are other programs that you can reach out to. I'm the worst person. Don't call me. I'm going to invite you out for a drink or something stupid like that. But I mean, I truly believe, I believe in the fact that we all need each other at some level. And we need to talk to people who have been there in our shared experience, particularly of this kind. So it's never too late. It's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to change things and feel better about yourself, because, we're not born happy or sad. I mean, that's a developed kind of trait. It's a choice.
Yeah.
You choose to be happy, or you choose to be sad. That's our kind of dilemma as the evolved human species, right? We have that hard choice to make. And I think if you're going to choose to be happy, you probably don't want to be abusing drugs and alcohol. Abusing, I say.
Yeah.
Just some light uses.
I don't, you know, I mean, I'm not a guy, that war is over for me. I don't.
Oh, no, look, I've a couple times I've been out with you and I always ask, I don't know why I still do at this point. Like, I mean, 3 or 4 times I'm like, you know, Roddy, you mind if I have a drink? Cause you know, we're at the bar and like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. You're just completely fine. You're just like, yeah, go ahead. Knock yourself out. Literally black out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think 20 years later,
well, not that, but yeah.
20 years later, I think you really, I'm sure it's a struggle every day. I'm not saying it's not. I'm sure it is, but you really seem to, like you said, you're walking that wolf. That wolf's not walking you. You're walking it. So if anybody needs some help, we'll put on our tweet any hotlines that Roddy would suggest that you could call. Roddy, not everybody can call you. I'm not putting that out there for people. You just look.
Yeah.
You're a fantastic guy, Roddy. You know, I consider you a friend. I don't really care what you think of me.
You're the fantastic guy. You and Carl, man, look at what you made.
Look. Yeah. Enough about me. What do you think of me? All right. So
famous people I have known by Roddy Boyd.
There you go. You know, just wrap it up, Roddy. I mean, anything you want to add, you want to say before the next time we speak that maybe we couldn't talk about it all, you know? I mean, but we got some of it in there. Anything you want to discuss?
I mean, I just want to say, I mean, I want to run the flag up, you know, give support for journalism a thought, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be mine. There's other great journalism. There's ProPublica.
No, well, just make it yours, Roddy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, do give, you know, the Foundation for Financial Journalism a look.
Okay.
I mean, we've been at this for 8 years now. And
what's the website name? Is it
ffj-online.org?
ffj-online.org.
Online.org.
Okay.
And the reporting there it's tight, it's crisp. We've been at this for 8 years and have never received a formal request of a correction. You know, we haven't, you know, I mean, we take a lot of pride in being accurate, and
that's really not that important, Roddy. You know, I haven't received one of those this week either. So that's not unusual.
And Roddy is a charity. His organization is a charity.
Your organization is a charity, so that's a deduction, right?
It's a 501c3.
Yeah, well, for us dumb people, that's a charity. So it is a charitable deduction.
Yes, it's 100% deductible.
Yeah, Carl brings up a good point. Good boy, Carl.
Thank you. Carl's, I mean, the guy is money.
Yeah.
He is money.
He can fetch too.
How do you pay Carl? Like, I mean, you can't, I mean, it's literally like, how do you pay Larry Bird in 1986? How do you pay 1990 Michael Jordan?
I don't know how you pay those guys. Carl biscuits. So
and a 6 of like Strohs.
Right. Well, Strohs comes in 15 packs, right? And 30 packs.
Okay.
So the Twitter handle, Roddy.
The foundation's Twitter handle is at ffj-online.org.
Uh-huh.
And my personal is Rod Boyd ILM. RODBOYD ILM.
Roddy, great having you on.
Hey, it's a big honor to be here. I appreciate this, man. I mean, this is great to talk to your audience, talk to you. And, you know, you're famous, dude. You hang out with Carson. You hang out with Freddie Brick.
Uh-huh.
You are on TV.
Uh-huh.
You are well endowed, handsome, all these things.
Well,
you know?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, yeah, all of that is terrible.
Exactly.
But it is
not in the model, not in the business plan.
No, all of it's true except for the famous part. But we're glad you're on the show, and we're going to bring you back. And we just think you're fantastic. Keep up that great work. The other thing we haven't said about your writing that, you know, because I kind of color myself as somebody who criticizes and critiques other people's writing. Yours is funny. So that's one of the things as you're donating to a charity that, you know, the short seller reports, he doesn't write that way. He's actually pretty funny. So give it a look, give it a read. And if you like this show, follow us on Twitter, Wolfpack Research at Wolfpack Reports. If you don't like it, follow us on Twitter at Wolfpack Reports. And I really don't want the feedback. All right, Roddy, thanks for joining us. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, leave us a comment, give us a retweet, follow us on Twitter. Thanks for joining us.
If you hear me